It is official. Talanoa Hufanga is out with the torn ACL. What's that mean for the 49ers? Who could fill in? And some reinforcements on the way already at defensive back. Fred Warner, Defensive Player of the Year. Can the Niners go back-to-back with the award? All that and more coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Eric_Crocker. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Big shout out to all the everydayers out there. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, bad news. It is official. What was feared and what was thought to be Talanoa Hufanga did tear his ACL. It was a clean tear, apparently. There's no meniscus damage, no MCL, LCL stuff. ACL tear for Talanoa Hufanga. He's going to be done for the year, and the hopes now, we'll see what that time frame is, 9 months or so, to get him back on the field, and hopefully Hufanga will be ready to come back and play early in the season in 2024, if not in training camp, with the miraculous way that we've seen some players heal in recent history. So you hope that is the case for Talanoa Hufanga. And now it's next man up, Croc. We talked a little bit about it yesterday. What does the loss mean to you for Talanoa Hufanga on the back end of the 49ers defense? And then there's multiple options. And really, Ji'Ayir Brown is Ji'Ayir Brown's job now to lose the 49ers third round rookie there at strong safety.
I think the toughest thing is just that veteran leadership, and that's what he is now. In year 3, a guy coming off of an all-pro season, having a bunch of starts, and obviously dealing with different, just adversity even throughout this season. Because you ask one person, they'll say, "Well, he hasn't been playing very well." You ask another person, and it's like, not too bad. But when you have that veteran experience, you kind of understand what this is all about. Like this brand of football the 49ers are playing, what the expectations are around there, what it feels like to play in the postseason. And I think losing a guy like that on the back end definitely could be a big blow. I think most people might think that you have Ji'Ayir Brown, you drafted him in the third round. He was actually your first draft pick in this past class. That, what? Hey, man, this guy has the talent, the ability to be able to kind of fit in, and hopefully you don't lose a step. Typically, it doesn't work out quite like that, but if you have a guy like Hufanga that can help you mentally, you have Gibson. Clearly, he's a veteran as well. Hopefully, that can help smooth over this transition going from Hufanga to Ji'Ayir Brown.
And a couple of roster moves this last week that we don't really talk a lot about that will potentially help. One is Jason Verrett was signed to the practice squad, and the way it was put was almost like a player coach sort of a role for Jason Verrett. He's a guy that the team just likes to have around or wants to have around. I don't know if Jason Verrett will ever be activated from the practice squad, if he's still kind of coming back to try to be healthy enough to play snaps for an NFL football team right now. He didn't stick with the Houston Texans on their practice squad, but maybe sort of a player coach role. And who knows, maybe just a future straight up coach is Jason Verrett for the 49ers or somebody else in the NFL. Clearly he has a love in the game trying to come back from all these injuries. Like, he's got the sickness, right? And so I wouldn't be shocked at all if he's a lifer, because man, to put his body through what it's been through to come back again in the NFL is pretty wild. So, and Jason Verrett's always been like, he hasn't been around the 49ers for that long, but he always seemed like a guy that was just like a great dude. And so if he's in that role of mentor right now, that's awesome for the 49ers. Maybe he comes back and plays. Maybe he ends up being a coach. I don't know, but he's there. And another one that was kind of under the radar, and I didn't quite catch it before the game, Darrell Luter was activated from PUP list. And it's almost like forgot he existed, because he's been on this PUP for an injury that didn't seem like it should have taken 10 weeks plus training camp to come back from. But that's what it took. And Darrell Luter was actually out there on the field and active for the 49ers in week 11. I didn't notice him on the field, and I wasn't really looking out for him because it was sort of a pregame thing, and I didn't really expect him to be active. He ended up getting 11 snaps, though, on special teams, Darrell Luter, 6 feet, 190. He ran the 4.46 40, and according to Pro Football Focus, he's out there for 11 special team snaps, 6 snaps on kick coverage, 3 on punt return, and 2 on punt coverage. Was the rookie Darrell Luter. So getting his feet wet now in the NFL, the 49ers rookie 5th round pick. So it was a big day for the 49ers rookie class of DBs with the 3rd rounder Ji'Ayir Brown thrust into the starting lineup because of the Hufanga injury. And now we got Darrell Luter back as well, playing at least some special team snaps. But really my thought here with this, Croc, and in replacing Talanoa Hufanga, we were asked a lot post-game, should the 49ers bring in Tony Jefferson or Jaquiski Tart, or a number of familiar names that are veteran NFL players that are out there as free agents right now. And a name I want to throw out there into the mix at safety, Croc, is Isaiah Oliver. If Isaiah Oliver is not going to cover well enough for the 49ers to want to put out there in the nickel, it's very different. And maybe you can talk to this a little bit, because I got some pushback when I mentioned this earlier today on Twitter. Some people saying, oh, Oliver's terrible. He can't cover. He can't play safety. It's very different playing cornerback, man-to-man type of coverage and playing safety type of coverage. It's very different in the NFL or anywhere. So I would love to hear you talk about that, because I think Oliver, and we talked about this when the 49ers signed him. I was like, okay, outside corner, 6 feet, 200 pounds, good tackler, maybe not the stickiest in man coverage, but physical, and they moved him inside, and he plays pretty well inside. That sounds like a safety to me. So maybe the fact that Luter's coming back now, you have Isaiah Oliver, who has a skill set that I think would translate to safety. Samuel Womack is there as well, that could be coming off the injured list sometime soon. Maybe they'll utilize some of the players they have to compete at safety rather than bringing in a safety, and they'll replace the roster spot for Talanoa Hufanga with one of those cornerbacks, and maybe you help yourself in both of those scenarios.
The most difficult part, in my opinion, talking to somebody who has never had to play safety, but just being in those rooms and those meetings,
couldn't tackle.
The mental aspect of playing safety, like, it's tougher, right? Like, you are essentially kind of the quarterback of the defense, making sure that guys are, lined up right, the strong side, the weak side, and how the play flips, and being able to identify and diagnose those things at the snap of a finger, as opposed to the cornerback. That's probably the easiest from the mental standpoint. Is like, they'll spit out this long verbiage, and at the end of it, cover one, and it's like, all right, that's what I got, cover one.
I know my assignment.
Yeah, safety, you have to understand a little bit more of what everyone's doing. From a physical standpoint, I think he definitely fits the mold of what you ideally would want your safety to be like. He does move well. He does have coverage skills, just maybe not to be that sticky guy in the slot, which in my opinion is probably the most difficult space to cover it. Like, that is the hardest job. That's why it was interesting to see he's a guy that played outside cornerback, didn't really, hack it there. What wasn't great. And it's like, all right, we're going to move you to the slot. You're going to actually be better. And sometimes that just depends on the scheme. Maybe they weren't asking a lot of, man coverage reps from him. So he played more, spot dropping, more, zone match type stuff that maybe worked more to his strengths. Clearly, the 49ers might be doing something a little different that isn't necessarily his strength. So, all right, let's put him at safety where he won't really be matched up on receivers in the slot, playing more space, still has the athleticism. I think change of direction and the feet. All those things are good. I think you're onto something. Oh, and he also has been a really good tackler in the run game, outside of a couple missed tackles in preseason. But, being able to tackle in the open field, I think he's done well at that as well. So I think you're onto something with putting him at that safety position where you take a lot of pressure off of his plate to be a pure man-to-man coverage guy.
Deontay Johnson obviously is still out there. He's been a Band-Aid for the 49ers for a long time at a number of positions, so he could be an option. Taylor Hawkins is on the practice squad. Quantrez Knight was signed off the 49ers practice squad, and I read something. I think maybe he was released recently, so he might be available as well to either be put back on the practice squad or be in the mix. So the 49ers have some options. I don't know that they necessarily need to go any sort of a veteran route. I don't think they need to spend any money on a player because they have options in house. And obviously that number one option is Ji'Ayir Brown. That's the guy they want to win the job. He stepped in immediately when Hufanga went out of the game. And unless he's a disaster, I think it's going to be his job. Darrell Luter's an interesting one, though. We haven't seen any of them, and I kind of forgot about him. And we liked his college tape, right, Croc? So yeah, that's interesting. Maybe he ends up working his way in on the outside. Maybe it's Samuel Womack, and then you have Diamador Lenore, and then that would open up Oliver to move around and do some things. So fascinating to see how this ends up playing out. And they kind of have still plenty of DBs and almost too many DBs, and Hufanga getting hurt. You don't want that to happen, but it does open up a spot so they don't have to drop somebody else now to bring back Womack from injured reserve if he's up next this week, which seems like he's really close to getting back.
The Luter thing is very interesting because him playing in this game, that was his first NFL action. Like, he was not there throughout preseason. He wasn't there in training camp, obviously OTAs, but like playing in pads and competing against another team, first action in the NFL. So, congratulations to Luter to kind of, get his feet wet a little bit, kind of gauge the speed of, opposing offenses, albeit from the sideline, outside of the special team snaps, but definitely someone that I'm pretty sure fans are going to be clamoring to kind of get in the mix and see, can you get him a few snaps? Can you do it with him a little bit of what we saw from Ahkello Witherspoon his rookie year, where Dante Johnson and Rashad Robinson, his name, Rashad Robinson,
yeah, LSU, skinny LSU,
yeah. So you had Dante Johnson, Robinson, but you knew, like, okay, we want to get this kid Ahkello Witherspoon some action. Eventually, he was activated, got some snaps here and there. You kind of weaseled his way in, traded Robinson, and then boom, Witherspoon was the starter from there on out. Can you figure out a way to get Luter just some snaps, even if it's 5, 6, 7 snaps on the defensive side of the ball to kind of work him in a little bit? That might be something they can potentially do.
I called him Dante Johnson, of course.
Yeah, Dante Johnson.
No disrespect on Dante Johnson's name. Next, let's talk a little bit about Fred Warner. Should we be talking about Fred Warner, Defensive Player of the Year? Should we be talking about Brock Purdy, MVP? Should we be talking about Brock Purdy, Comeback Player of the Year? All of these questions we've been asked. We'll get into those next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by Gametime, the Gametime app. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. It should be an exciting time, and the buying ticket process should not bring you down from all the excitement of going to an NFL football game, any sports, music, comedy, or theater events near you. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets to all of those events, including 49ers football. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the best price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. You see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what you're getting. You know what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices, my favorite part, show the total up front, so you don't get that. So you know you're getting a great deal without those hidden fees. And buying tickets is a snap. A couple taps, you're in. Those tickets are in the Gametime app. You don't have to go fishing through your email once you get to your event, which could be within an hour of when you buy those tickets. So great last-minute deals at Gametime to buy tickets to your next event. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is also sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. This time of year can be a lot for some people. It's a lot, even if you don't have extra stuff going on. And for some people, it's even a lot more. And it's natural to feel some sadness or even some anxiety about the holiday season. But adding something new and positive to your life can counteract some of those feelings. Therapy can be a bright spot amid all of the stress and change, something to look forward to make you feel grounded and to give you the tools to manage everything going on in your specific situation, in your specific life. So if you ever have those seasonal blues, and I know it can happen to anybody at any time, maybe give online therapy a try. Sometimes just that weekly check-in to make sure you are on track in your life for whatever it is, even if you're not feeling the seasonal blues. So if you think about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. Entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire. You get matched to a licensed therapist. And, if you don't hit it off with that therapist, it's okay. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So find your bright spot this season with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. So you were asked a question, Croc, about Fred Warner and maybe even Fred Warner for Defensive Player of the Year. And it's not hard to me. Like the layperson that turns on a 49ers game, when the 49ers are on offense, Christian McCaffrey gets the ball like 7 out of 10 plays, right? And when you're watching the 49ers on defense, it feels like Fred Warner is in on 7 out of 10 plays on the defensive side of the ball. It's not hard to notice those players. They jump out of the screen at you. And so when you're talking about season awards right now, and you start looking at the statistics and you start to put together the season that Fred Warner is having. Last season, it was Nick Bosa. Could the Defensive Player of the Year award stay with the San Francisco 49ers in 2023, Croc?
Yeah, that's going to be a big one. I'm looking at the stats right here. 66 tackles, 3 picks, 2.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles. That's big. 8 pass deflections and coverage, 5 tackles for loss, 4 quarterback hits, and a 68 QB rating against him. So he's doing a terrific job really in all facets of the game. However they're utilizing him, obviously we see the stress that the 49ers put on him, as a coverage guy, having to carry vertically pushing routes down the field. And I think more times than not, he does a terrific job with that. Did get called for defensive pass interference in the Tampa Bay game, but the Niners ask a lot of them. And when you think about MVP, I mean, he's also like the emotional leader of the 49ers as well. So it's almost like they go as he goes. If you look during that 2-game stretch, I don't think he had his best football. Probably missed more tackles in those 2 games than he did the rest of the season. And 49ers didn't play well. He comes back. He's lighting the world on fire. He's flying around. He's hitting guys. He's forcing takeaways, getting interceptions. All of a sudden, you win back-to-back games. So we see the importance, and we definitely feel that from the 49ers standpoint. Can he be Defensive Player of the Year? And the tough thing is going to be how well some of these edge rushers are playing. We've talked about Myles Garrett. We've talked about TJ Watt. I feel like every game I watch, Myles Garrett's making an impact play, a sack, a safety. He hit a guy yesterday right at the goal line, knocked him into the end zone, but they said he was down at the 1-yard line. It's literally every single game he's making these plays. TJ Watt, I've watched him not only get sacks, but interception, running back to the house. We watched him against the 49ers, 3 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and recovered 1 of those. So those guys will definitely have something to say about Warner being Defensive Player of the Year, but I think the trajectory he's on right now, he should definitely be in the conversation.
You know, it's funny you mentioned Myles Garrett. People are even talking about him as maybe even beyond Defensive Player of the Year, maybe even MVP right now because of how that Cleveland Browns defense is running their team, and they, you know, they're winning games 13-10 with a rookie quarterback that did not play well, and so that defense is winning them games, and it won them a game against the San Francisco 49ers a few weeks ago. It's funny. Recently, I think it was this past week or so, Nick Bosa was on Eric Armstead's podcast, and I just saw a short clip of it. But Bosa was asked by Armstead about players he watches or players, other edge rushers that he likes around the league, and he talked about Max Crosby because of Max Crosby's motor and the way he plays, and he really loved watching him play and could take some stuff from his game. And then it was like, but he was like, Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons, it's like, you can't take their freakishness from their game. Like you can't teach what they have. These guys are freaks of nature and they're just different. So it's even funny. Someone like Nick Bosa, 0% body fat, and is a reigning Defensive Player of the Year. And he's looking at someone like Myles Garrett and he's like, how do you even duplicate that? That's some crazy stuff right there.
Yeah, shoot, and you brought up Michael Parsons, my big brother right here. He's with me. He's a Dallas Cowboy fan. What Parsons have last game? 3 sacks, 2.5, or 2.5 sacks for Parsons in the last game. And it's funny watching him because when you look at Bosa and the way Bosa wins, and you see like just how technical he is from a pass rush standpoint, the hands, all that. Somehow it's like you blink and then the quarterback is getting sacked by Michael Parsons. Like he's just so fast. He uses like all speed. I don't even know if there's that much technique. He might tell you there is and other people, but I do agree with Bosa. You probably can't teach the way that those two guys win. As far as Fred Warner, maybe he can learn something, from them when he does his stunts and his blitzes, and we've seen him get to the quarterback with his sacks that he has right now. But if he's not the league MVP, he's definitely the 49ers MVP. Now, everything he's doing, I want to kind of compare it to the 49ers of the past, like the greats, right? when we look at the season he's having, he's kind of filling up the stat sheets. Does it remind you of Patrick Willis or Navarro Bowman? And when I was talking to my buddy Chris Roscoe's, I had kind of went back to that 2000. I want to say it was 2012 season, 2013 season, and I thought Navarro Bowman should have been Defensive Player of the Year. And same year he tore his knee up in the postseason against Seattle, but he had a special year. Like, how does Fred Warner's season that he's kind of having right now, the trajectory of it, like, line up with a potential Defensive Player of the Year in Navarro Bowman from 2013? Like, that's how we have to kind of like pair those up.
Yeah, it's in some ways it was more difficult for those guys back then because what made Patrick Willis and Navarro Bowman special is they were able to cover in an era where there wasn't that many linebackers that could cover. There was a lot of 250-pound thumpers, and the thing is they had to still be big and bulked up and play that role and take on lead blockers and take on fullbacks. And most teams in the NFL don't even employ a fullback anymore. So and especially Patrick Willis, because Patrick Willis is a pretty narrow guy. When I saw him in person in plain clothes, I was blown away how small he was, how slim he was. Like, he's ripped, obviously, but he was built for speed. He was built more like a bulked up wide receiver than you would think a 240 something pound, 250 pound linebacker. And so I would imagine that Navarro Bowman, who was a really good hooper, right, back in the day with Kevin Durant back in their high school days, I would think both those players would actually play up if they weren't asked to bulk up and be so big. So I think they could definitely play in this day and age. And Fred Warner would probably be not as good in coverage because they'd ask him to be 10 pounds heavier if he played a decade ago.
I actually clubbed a little bit with Navarro Bowman. Super random. It was when I was with the Jets, one of my teammates' parties. We're in the club. And next thing I know, I look over, I'm a big 49er fan, even when I was there. I'm like, Navarro Bowman is in this section with us in the VIP. And you're right. I mean, he looked, if I didn't know it was Navarro Bowman, I would not have thought that this was an NFL linebacker, all pro Navarro Bowman. Like, he had a white t-shirt on. He looked slim. Like, he didn't look like this, like, yoked up linebacker. Like, I think most people think they look like, especially on TV, they look like so big, but he just kind of looked like a normal guy that goes to the gym. But it's just an amazing athlete. So I do think maybe, and this was the offseason, we're talking about, April or May, where maybe guys aren't as big as they potentially will be once season comes around.
It's 49ers should be more known for their linebackers and linebacker play, man. You go back to, Norton obviously wasn't a homegrown player, but the 49ers going back to Keena Turner and Charles Haley, an off-ball outside pass rushing linebacker. The 49ers have a really good history of linebackers. When you think Niners, you think of Terrell Owens and Jerry Rice and receivers and, the Bill Walsh passing game and quarterbacks. But linebackers, man, it might be one of the richest positions in 49ers history. And Fred Warner is absolutely one of those and should be on the conversation, I think, for Defensive Player of the Year. But right now, I think Myles Garrett would run away with it. How about Comeback Player of the Year for Brock Purdy? How about MVP for Brock Purdy? Some more Brock Purdy stats after he was perfect, near perfect on Sunday next. This episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Score early this NFL season and score often with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins on that first money line bet. And then you can use those $150 in bonus bets to bet on spreads, player props, over-unders, tons more. Build your own parlays. Just about any NFL bet you can think of, you can find it at FanDuel. Who's the next coach to get fired? How about Coach of the Year? How about that Defensive Player of the Year award? How about the Super Bowl champion? Bet on those San Francisco 49ers, and you can find those odds and a whole lot more in any sport out there at FanDuel. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on that action than right now. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That is, once again, FanDuel.com/lockedon to get $150 in bonus bets with any $5 money line winning bet. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Just throw some more stats out there on Brock Purdy, Croc, as you ponder what some listeners have asked us about Brock Purdy, talking about him as potential MVP of the NFL, his perfect passer rating from this last week, maybe even comeback player of the year, because this season did end in injury, and nobody's even sure if he's going to be ready to start the season. And miraculously, he was ready to start training camp, and has been a dynamite for the San Francisco 49ers so far this year. How about this one? We know it was a perfect passer rating in week 11 against the Buccaneers. But if you go back the week before as well, Brock Purdy has a passer rating of 157.3 over his last 2 starts against the Bucs and the Jaguars. That's the highest passer rating by an NFL quarterback over a 2-start span since quarterback starts were first tracked in 1950. Croc. That's the heater that Brock Purdy is on right now over the last 2 games. 157.3. He leads the NFL in a number of categories, including passer rating right now. I believe it's 115 is his passer rating for the season. Just ridiculously efficient numbers that Brock Purdy is putting up right now on the 49ers offense.
Incredible. And you talked about the perfect passer rating last game, right? 158.3. That's as high of a passer rating as you can have in the NFL. I saw something pop up, and it said the last time a 49er quarterback had a perfect passer rating in the game, Joe Montana. And we're talking about several years ago, which is funny because you and I were having a conversation yesterday. And you were like, we were talking about just his attributes, not having like the biggest arm and whatnot. And how it doesn't look like your prototypical elite quarterback and what we've been accustomed to think an elite quarterback is supposed to look like. And you were like, it kind of looks a little like Joe Montana. And you were like, I was like, I didn't watch Joe Montana. I haven't even went back and like rewatched games, but you were like, just from the standpoint of just not having the biggest arm, but playing with a lot of timing, rhythm, and getting the ball in the hands of guys that are terrific after the catch. And when you watch Brock, you don't come away like my brother's over here shaking his head at me. You don't come away like overly impressed from a physical standpoint, what it just looks like. But the results are the results. And the results, and you can shake your head as much as you want, BJ, the results are there aren't a lot of players or quarterbacks playing better quarterbacking for their team and their offense than what you're getting from Brock Purdy.
He's not the next Joe Montana, but he's playing like Joe Montana right now. And in fact, he's putting up numbers that are better than numbers that Joe Montana put up in some of his Super Bowl winning seasons. He's, what? Your brother would, I think this would be better to put it to help your brother understand, who's a Cowboys fan. Take like,
so his quarterback was Troy Aikman.
That's what I'm saying. It's like take like 90% of Troy Aikman's interceptions away, and that's kind of how Brock Purdy's playing right now.
BJ, so what Peacock just said was take 90% of Troy Aikman's interceptions away, and then that's how Brock Purdy's playing right now. Oh, he hates it. But it's like he's playing very well. I mean, what do you do with what we just watched even yesterday?
Yeah.
Now, okay, if you want to nitpick at it, man, he took 4 sacks. All right. And that's it. That's where like the nitpicking stops.
How does I don't think anybody in the planet knows what the formula is for quarterback rating. How can you have a perfect quarterback rating, but he had a few incomplete? I think he had like 4 incompletions or something like that. Like it wasn't perfect, but he's got a perfect passer rating. So if he completes one more of those passes, his passer rating can't get better. How does that even make sense? How's that possible?
Right, like if he throws 0 incompletions for a game.
Yeah.
But it has something to do with the touchdowns, and then not turning the ball over. I think when you start adding in some of those things, that's why some people like veer more towards the QBR.
QBR, yeah,
because that takes into account everything, like your legs, your arm, like the sacks you take. But even then, I mean, is he still the number 1 QBR quarterback in the league? I mean, he's top of that too. So,
I mean, he's doing some special stuff. You know what's crazy though? So this might sound insane. I think Brock Purdy has a better chance of winning the MVP award than he does Comeback Player of the Year award, because DeMar Hamlin walking on a football field this season, that award was sewn up. And to be honest with you, like, and this isn't on Hamlin or anybody, but I think the Comeback Player of the Year award is the worst award that the NFL has. And people are always trying to manufacture ways to get, hey, how about our guy? Maybe he's Comeback Player of the Year. It's like, I saw a lot about Russell Wilson. It's like, if you're a Broncos fan, you're grasping at straws to find something. You're like, hey, maybe Comeback Player of the Year for for Russell Wilson. It's like you can't come back from sucking to come back.
They do that though. Did Geno Smith win it last year?
But Geno Smith didn't. Geno Smith was a backup at least. Like he wasn't starting.
But he still came back from just you weren't really good, and then now you have a terrific year, so you're comeback player of the year. And I always felt like it should be you're coming back from something catastrophic, like especially like an injury, and man, you snapped your ankle. Dak Prescott, like something along the lines of that, and you came back, and all of a sudden you played very well, or you had some ailment. Heck, receiver, and I haven't seen him out there as of late. We'll see. I think he got hurt again, maybe missed a year, but John Mechie from Houston Texans was drafted out of Alabama. He had cancer last year, and then he came back, but then I think he tore something. Like that I get it. That's man, he came back from something crazy and had a good year or whatever. DeMar Hamlin, and there's pushback on it from him. Somebody even said because of how I feel, something about woke crowd. I don't know, saying I was woke or something. I don't know. I don't even know what that stuff means. But I guess because he's not like this all-star, or he's not playing like at this high level, it's like, nah, he shouldn't be comeback player of the year. He died on the football field. Like they had to spend 10 minutes bringing him back to life. Like he literally died. You talk about comeback from something. He came back from the dead. And people are like, nah, he shouldn't win. Like he's playing in games, and he's not active every week, but he's playing in enough games to where it's like, how is it not? How would you even consider anyone else? He came back from the dead.
Like, yeah, so like someone like Russell Wilson won the comeback player of the year award this year. It would have been like if Troy Aikman won it in 1995, because in 94 he had 13 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. Then the next year had 16 touchdowns and only 7 interceptions, right?
That is real stats for real?
Those are real stats, yeah.
That is.
Troy Aikman's career touchdown to interception ratio is 165 to 141. That's a Hall of Fame quarterback right there.
And that's what they're trying to do with Eli Manning. I'm like, absolutely not. Like, how do you put him in? You can't talk about the record, or you can't talk about the history of the game without talking about Eli Manning and how he beat Tom Brady, undefeated team. And it's like, dude, like I get it. He had 2 great runs. The other 15 seasons are pretty much forgettable.
That's when we start talking about Hall of Fame. I start having some problems with it because it becomes the Hall of Very Good, and if you have to have a long conversation, that means it's not a Hall of Famer,
right?
But whatever. The Hall of Fame's not for me. It's a museum for whoever's voting on it to feel important. I think that's kind of what it ends up.
Someone asked me, how many interceptions? Like, if you have over 30 interceptions, should that make you eligible for the Hall of Fame? And I think they were kind of alluding to Tashawn Gibson because he has a bunch of picks. I'm like, I think you could talk a lot about the NFL without mentioning Tashawn Gibson. I think you could talk a lot about the 49ers right now without mentioning Tashawn Gibson. So I think he's out and won't be considered for Hall of Fame. But maybe when they do the all-decade 2020 49ers team, maybe he'll be honored with that squad.
Oh, love Tashawn Gibson, man. He's in the right place at the right time. Smart player. Always around the football, making interceptions, really good player. But like you got to calm down when you start putting stuff out there like that.
Real quick, I want to get my brother's response live on the air. BJ, Brock Purdy, NFL MVP. Should he be like one of the leaders? He said I'm trolling him now. It's like, how am I trolling?
2 weeks ago, you guys wanted him to die.
No, we did not want it. He said two weeks ago we wanted him to die. We didn't want him to die. 2 weeks ago, we just want him to like, hey, you get in this situation, pull out a win.
I saw the comments, bro.
2 weeks ago.
Get him out of there.
Okay, so clearly BJ is not an everydayer, because 2 weeks ago we said he's the same guy. Don't freak out. He's the same guy. And what happened? He's the same.
He said Brock Purdy is a front runner.
Oh man.
Watch.
Well, I mean, I'm not surprised you would have that point of view when Brock Purdy's team's beating your team 42-10.
Yeah. Peacock said he's not surprised you have that view when Brock Purdy beat your team 42-10.
No, Brock Purdy didn't beat my team.
He said Brock Purdy did not beat his team.
Or knock him out of the playoffs.
Schemed our team out.
His And now this is an interesting one. We got to say this for another show because we're running out of time. But he basically said our defensive coordinator won the game.
100%.
But if you talk to a lot of 49er fans, they are not high on our defensive coordinator. He said they're tripping.
Steve Wilks, comeback player of the year, goes from the booth to the sideline. And now he's winning games for the San Francisco 49ers.
Let's go, Steve Wilks.
Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. We're going to do we got a Winky Wednesday with the Winkstradamus coming up. 10 for 10 now on the season with his preseason predictions on 49ers wins and losses. Of course, the Seattle Seahawks coming up Thanksgiving style. We've got to go crossover episode. And of course, we'll come back after the game and do what we do here every day here on Locked On 49ers. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen. Croc and I back tomorrow. Locked On 49ers.
Subscribe to this video.